Look around the room for a minute. Just take a look around. I was really noticing today more than I often do that, you know, Sunday mornings are the most segregated time in America. They're the most segregated time in America. 10 a.m. on Sunday morning. Those are for people who get up earlier than us. That's West Coast time. I just want to take a mental snapshot of how that doesn't have to be so. And the way that I can do that is to look around this room and see it.
Amen.
Yes. And a new jerk. Sorry. All right. So we are talking this month, or I'm talking this month. All the talks are based on this book by Lynn Twist called The Soul of Money. And I want to say in advance that 4 weeks of me talking about it for 20 minutes doesn't do the book justice. More than any other book about money that I've encountered in New Thought, this book really, it has a sophistication and a maturity that I think a lot of the time is lacking in the way that we teach prosperity principles. So if you're not familiar with it, highly recommend it. Definitely worth a read, and maybe even a book club study or something. So last week we began by looking at some. Lynn Twist has this great phrase. She says, rather than looking at the unanswered questions, we must begin looking at the unquestioned answers. And that's where that applies to money. Is there are these fundamental underlying beliefs about money that are ubiquitous, and we live like we're kind of like fish, and those beliefs are water. So unless we look directly at them, we're swimming in them. And the net idea underneath all of those beliefs that we looked at last week is this thing that Lynn Twist calls the lie of scarcity. So what I want to do today is move us from the idea of scarcity to the idea of sufficiency. Before I do that, I want to go back and look at, okay, you know, I could just as easily do this by trying to act it out. Okay, so let's say it's 3,000 years ago, and I have oxen. I mean, that's my shtick in the world, right? I'm the ox chick. I have some oxes. And you are the, I don't know, let's see, you're the artisan that makes the containers, the pottery in which water goes, right? And I need containers and you need oxen, and so we trade. It's called bartering. We trade. Well, now let's add a third person. That person over there has a different wear or a different skill or a different something. And I can come and get containers from you and give you oxen, and then I can go to that person and get what he or she has. And you see all the trading that's going on? So it gets kind of complicated. Plus, when I think about it, it gets burdensome and kind of heavy. I mean, maybe that's because I'm the ox chick. But at some point, there has to be a better way. So Lisa says this: if we peel back thousands of years of cultural conditioning and assumptions to take a fresh look at money, we begin with some very, very basic observations. Money is not a product of nature. Money doesn't grow on trees. Pennies don't rain from heaven. Money is an invention, a distinctly human invention. It is a total fabrication of our genius. We made it up and we manufacture it. It is an inanimate object that has appeared in many different forms in its more than 25 to 3,500 year history, whether we're talking about shells or stones or ingots of precious metals, a paper bill or a blip on the computer screen. From the very beginning, money was invented to facilitate the sharing and exchanging of goods and services among individuals and groups. Let me say that again. Money was invented to facilitate the sharing and exchanging of goods and services among individuals and groups. Money still facilitates the sharing and exchange of goods and services, but somewhere along the way, the power we gave money outstripped its original utilitarian function. Now, rather than relating to money as a tool, we have come to relate to money as if it's a fact of nature, a force to be reckoned with. The stuff called money, mass-produced tokens or paper bills with no more inherent power than a notepad or a Kleenex, has become the single most controlling force in our lives. No more power than a notepad or a Kleenex. Now, the way that I read this is that it used to be a means to an end, and somehow it became the end. And we've forgotten that. And in our forgetting, we have given money an incredible amount of power. Now, somehow wrapped up in this losing sight of what money actually is the idea that these ideas that undergird scarcity. So there's never enough of it. I've got to get mine before you get yours, if you ever get yours, right? So there's this thing called scarcity has an energetic of the grab or the cling. It's very contracting. And the thing about it is the belief, the scarcity thing, it's rampant in our culture. Actually, it's rampant in most cultures that use money. And Lynn Twist points out that in her work as a fundraiser for the Hunger Project and then another nonprofit that she went on to found, it doesn't matter how much people have. And she saw that people that were billionaires still, many of them, not all of them, they still had this, there's not going to be enough for me, for mine, for whatever I need. And so she realized that it's not related to an amount. Right? It's a belief. For many of us, the first thought of the day is I didn't get enough sleep. The next one is I don't have enough time. Whether true or not, that thought of not enough occurs to us automatically before we even think to question it or examine it. We spend most of the hours and days of our lives hearing, explaining, complaining, or worrying about what we don't have enough of. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough rest. We don't have enough exercise. We don't have enough work. We don't have enough profits. We don't have enough power, enough wilderness, enough weekends. Of course we don't have enough money. We're not thin enough, or smart enough, or pretty enough, or fit enough, or educated enough, or successful enough, or rich enough, ever. Before we even sit up in bed, before our feet touch the floor, we're already inadequate, already behind, already losing, already lacking something. We go to bed like this, and then we wake up and do it often again the next day. Now, when I read it, you hear the absurdity of it, don't you? You hear the absurdity of it, and yet if you're anything like me, you kind of like, it gets on you. It gets on you. Our household had a real going to tell you a story from our household in which that is a real concrete example of how this shows up in money for us. When we found New Thought, Michael and I, we began using the prosperity principles. We did a lot of that stuff, and our income grew and grew and grew, and which is a great thing. And yet every single month, every single month, we had just under what we needed, or maybe just slightly over. Now, I can look back and see, in the first couple of years of our relationship, I was in school full-time, wasn't working. Her massage business was much smaller than it was. So I would say our income tripled over a 6-year period as I finished school and her business grew and all that. And yet, it was just under, or just at, or just above what we needed. And when we looked at each other and said, what in the is going on here? It's like, okay, well, there's a belief driving this. So we can do all the prayer work or the affirmations or the whatever else, but we actually have to look at what's driving this. What is the belief that's driving this? And here's the good news. The bad news was the belief was that the belief was in lack or in scarcity. The good news is it's a belief. And that's a really important thing to hear. There is no reality out there of scarcity. Scarcity lives in here. The good news about that is when you change what's in here, your experience changes. That idea that you can change your thinking or change your beliefs or change your consciousness, that is the fundamental concept of the undergirding of all of New Thought. That this, your experience, is a reflection of what goes on here and here and here. So that's the good news. You can change a belief. Now, how do you change a belief? You change a belief the same way that you get to Carnegie Hall, which is practice. Right? Because, you know, what Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind and Spirit, said is that trained thought is more powerful than untrained thought. And see, the truth is that we are swimming in this idea of scarcity. So, it's pervasive in our culture. It's pervasive in our upbringing. I mean, I know it was really pervasive. My dad was a Depression baby. My mom was a war baby. And it was the fundamentally the idea that shaped my upbringing. There was not going to be enough. And so when we decide that we are going to change our belief, we have to practice it. It doesn't come for free. Sometimes just the realization is enough to wake us up out of the dream. But most of the time, I don't know, it's like we have narcolepsy. You know, you can wake up out of a dream and then you kind of nod off again. The way to change the belief, to get rid of the idea of scarcity, and to nurture the idea of sufficiency, is to practice it over and over and over again. And the good news is you can practice it. You don't just practice it with money, you practice it with everything. So every time you hear yourself saying, there's not enough, okay, is it true? Is it really true? There's not enough time to get done what I need to get done. Is it really true that I'm not skinny enough? Is it really true that I don't make enough money? Is it really true that I don't have enough friends or enough support? See, all of those things, every time we wake up and change that, we're practicing. So Lynn Twist says that we can get rid of this idea of scarcity, quit living the great lie, and begin living what she calls the surprising truth of sufficiency. By sufficiency, I don't mean a quantity of anything. Sufficiency isn't an amount at all. Sufficiency isn't 2 steps up from poverty or 1 step short of abundance. It isn't a measure of barely enough or more than enough. Sufficiency isn't an amount at all. It's an experience, a context we generate, a declaration, a knowing that there is enough and that we are enough. When we live in the context of sufficiency, we find a natural freedom and a natural integrity. We engage in life from a sense of our own wholeness rather than a desperate longing to be complete. Now, the reason that that's important is, we come here to HeartSpace or communities like it, we study metaphysical principles, we immerse ourselves in new thought philosophy, we do all those things to reveal our own wholeness. And yet, as long as we are having a relationship with money that is based on scarcity, we're house divided. We're house divided. And we want to engage from a place of wholeness. And that includes in the way that we think about money, in the way our beliefs about it, our ideas about it. Lindquist says, this way of seeing, which is consistent with the laws of the natural world, offers a new set of principles or set of assumptions for a whole new culture around money. It teaches us how to be stewards of money rather than gatherers of money. It teaches us how to bring quality and intelligence to our use of financial resources in ways that reflect our inner wealth rather than the flamboyant display of the accumulation of outer riches. In so doing, whether one is an American billionaire or a Guatemalan peasant, an inner city single mother, or a middle-class mid-level manager, the experience of enough, sufficiency, and respectful stewardship of financial and other resources redefines life in such a way that sufficiency and fulfillment are available to all. There is no sacrifice in this. There is satisfaction. So that feeling of scarcity is a contracted feeling. What I love about this is when she bridges over to this idea of sufficiency, it ceases being about me and mine, and it becomes about we and us, and the idea that there's probably enough, that it is possible for everyone to have sufficiency. It just requires a change of mind. She says, true abundance does exist. It flows from sufficiency and an experience of the beauty and wholeness of what is. Abundance is a fact of nature. It's a fundamental law of nature that there is enough, and it's finite. Its finiteness is no threat. It creates a more accurate relationship that commands respect, reverence, and managing those resources with the knowledge that they are precious and in ways that do the most good for the most people. The most good for the most people. Not me and mine and I gotta hold on to it because there might not be enough, but this sense that there is enough, that it's sufficient, and that extends to all of us. This is not an easy task, per se. Think of it like, there's like this raging river of scarcity that's and you're the little fish that's going, right? It feels like that sometimes. But the beauty of this is your little swimming muscles, the more you use them, the stronger they get. And pretty soon, with all of that effort, you look around, and where you thought you were the only one, you see you actually see that there are other species swimming against the current. And I want to say that this is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. And the fruits of our labors, the payoff for this is huge, because what if you were living life from a place of wholeness? What if when you looked at your checkbook or your 401k or whatever it is, what you saw there was enoughness? You saw possibility. You saw not that, oh my God, I got to scramble for more. You know, don't let anybody get my cheese. Not any of that, but you had an expansion toward your money. And what we know in New Thought is that when we practice something, when we focus on something, like, oh, there's enough. What the universe says is, yes, there is enough. And then what we experience is more sufficiency, more enoughness. And sometimes the numbers grow, and sometimes they don't. But what matters is the peace and the wholeness and the sense of being enough and having enough and doing enough and loving enough and time enough and beauty enough. All of that grows. And I think that's really what we're after. That's really what we're after. So I'm going to give you all a homework assignment for this week. Next week we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the three great, sort of the three underlying principles of sufficiency. But what I'd like to ask you to do this week is to just pay attention to how much of your story making goes to there's not enough, whatever that looks like. Like, I'm not pretty enough, or I didn't get enough sleep, or there's, whatever it is. And how much of your story making goes to sufficiency? Or how much gratitude are you practicing? How much do you notice how full your life is? How pretty your skin is? How shapely your body? You know what I'm saying? How much are you saying, oh, it's not quite right? And how much are you saying, yes, it's right? Because what we have to know if we're going to actually practice is where are we starting? And that's a different place for each of us. Some of us have done a lot of work around this, and some of us are just starting the journey. But whatever it is, we want to kind of get a feel for where we're at so that we can move in the direction that we want to go. So let's pray.